So if you've been following me, you know I have a love for travel sketching, but because I teach as my main job, I can't really travel whenever I want, and I mostly travel in the summer and sometimes during break. So today I wanted to pretend I'm traveling and do a kind of a travel sketch in the comfort of my study. So I did a drawing of an iconic scene of Venice. That's a view of the gondolas looking towards, I believe it's San Giorgio Maggiore, but I'm not positive. And if you look at pictures of Venice, you're likely to think that it is mandatory to take a picture of this scene because there are just so many, with slight variation, the number of gondolas, the time of day, the angle. But basically, this is the view. Gondolas in the foreground and the church and buildings in the background. I'm using colors from a palette that I've recently created called The Italian Cities. And it's a combination of colors that have a name based on Italian cities for historical reasons, and colors that are actually earth colors that come from those Italian cities. All but one are traditional. One I made up, and that is the blue that I started this sketch with. I couldn't find a blue named after an Italian city, and because I'm absolutely in love with the Amalfi Coast, I created a blue with a mix of two pigments that actually come from Italy, just to keep it authentic, and called it Amalfi, because that's my favorite place in the world. So that's a good reason. And I'm using that Amalfi now also for the water. The sky, I wanted to make it a little bit more dramatic than just blue. And for that reason, I mixed it with a color that is called solferino. Solferino is not as well known as magenta. It's similar to magenta. It's a little bit darker, but its origins are very close to the origins of magenta. Both magenta and solferino are cities in the Italian north, and both of them are sites of important battles. And if I were more knowledgeable in history, I'd be able to tell you exactly who the battles were between, but I don't. I do know that France won, and so if you visit any kind of French city, you'll always find, or often, I've always been able to see streets named magenta and or solferino. They're often two streets that are near each other because of this reason, because they are two battles that took place around the same time in the 19th century, and that was also the time when the color was invented. So some people say that the color magenta and the color solferino took their names because those battles were so memorable and people wanted to name these new colors after them. Others say, and I like this story better, that those battles were so bloody that people couldn't get them out of their mind, and that's why these red colors were created to memorialize the red blood of those who lost their lives in that battle. I will always pick the most interesting story if given a choice. These poles I just did in raw sienna, and that is a natural earth from Tuscany, from the region around Siena. The green was a Verona green earth, another natural earth, and Verona, you may know, is the town of Romeo and Juliet, and it is a town that is not far from Venice. It's in the same region as Venice, the Veneto region. And now, finally, I'm using the most relevant of all these colors, and that is the color known as Venice Red. It is also an earth. I don't know the exact details. I doubt that it is actually from the city of Venice. Italy is very much a city-based culture, and often things such as food that come from the territory around Italy, around a certain city, take their name from the city rather than the territory. You know, so we speak of prosciutto di Parma. It doesn't really come from downtown Parma. It comes from the area near Parma. Now, when you paint like this, you're always trying to figure out whether your adjoining areas are dry enough that your color is not going to go all over the place. On the other hand, the beauty of working loosely is that you don't worry too much about that. Now the next new color that I'm bringing in is very dear to me because, as you may know, I was born in Rome and grew up near Rome. And this is a color known as Rome Black. And what's unique about Rome Black is that most blacks, like the most common black, I think, in watercolor, though again, a lot of people think you shouldn't use black in watercolor and you should make your own darks, which in general, it's not something I disagree with. But first of all, rules are boring. And secondly, especially when you're travel sketching, you don't necessarily have the leisure to create your own darks all the time. So it's convenient to have one available to you. But anyways, the most common black is probably something like ivory black, or the names change. It used to be made out of ivory, bone black. And those are organic pigments that come from burned organic matter. Luckily, no longer ivory, but still bones. Rome Black, on the other hand, and for somebody as interesting in place as I am, is an earth color. And this particular, well, all Rome Black should come from the area around Rome. So I think I'm going to let things dry now. So in the spirit of acting as if this were a travel sketch, I'm going to keep it loose. I find, even though, except for when I travel, so the majority of the time I work in my study. But I find that I don't really like sketching buildings unless I'm in front of them. I love sketching buildings when I travel. It's my favorite thing to do. I would rather sketch buildings than anything else. But there is something about the actual presence, being in the place, that makes it much more fun to sketch. I mean, I'm not the only person who says this, but I find it's especially true with buildings for some reason. Trying to give some dimension to these. So now, as when I travel, it's about which part of the painting is dry enough that I can go without making a mess. Because if you're a tight painter, you're going to want to really be careful about that. Like many watercolor painters, I'd like to be looser than I am, without being sloppy, though. Loose and sloppy is different. So, when you want to paint loosely, you gotta have a few, what they call, lost edges. It's okay if there is some mixing of colors. I've done these the other way. Oh well. So, for example, here, I love that. There's a little bit of mixing of the foliage with the pole. Now here I am using mostly the very appropriate Venice red. It's hard to paint and talk at the same time. I'm mixing it here with a bit of raw sienna and also a bit of yellow that you've seen in the bushes. I'll tell you more about that yellow because, well, I can tell you now. I mixed it and called it Naples yellow. Naples yellow is a well-known color. It's an old traditional color. It is not an earth. Nobody really knows for sure why it's called Naples yellow. I've looked The only places that even care to figure it out are from the 19th century. Some books that say that it is named after Mount Vesuvius, of all places. The earth of Mount Vesuvius. It is possible that originally it was an earth. It's not an earth now. It is a highly toxic color, which is why I made one up that is not toxic. Okay, this is where I'm going to take total liberty as a painter. These cloths that cover the gondolas when they're not being used are always the same color as far as I've seen in pictures, and that color is blue. Now, here we have a blue sky, we have a blue sea. I don't really feel like having blue cloths in the gondolas. Therefore, I'm changing it to a mix of my earth colors, with the dominance of Venice. This is the point of a painting where I tend to get somewhat discouraged, because I worked on it for a while and it still doesn't look that good. So when that moment happens, that's when you got to start doing some definition, just to give yourself the desire to go on. It would be such a shame to stop right now. And this background scene, I'm not really sure what I want from it either. Just a general reminder that this church is here, but it's not the focal point. Not that I'm crazy about these things are so annoying. I don't know what they're called. They're kind of typical of Venetian gondolas. They probably have a use that most of us ignore. But they're annoying to paint, is what I meant. I'm sure I went on a gondola when I was a kid. My mom's from the region of Venice. She grew up in Rome, but her family's from Padova, which is a town about 40-minute train ride from Venice. So when we went to visit relatives, which wasn't as often as one would think, but still, especially if we had international visitors, we would take them to Venice. And we'd never stayed in Venice because Venice was notoriously expensive. So we stayed in Padua, but the train ride is very convenient. So something else I do when I travel sketch is if I have a color on my brush, I just go ahead and use it wherever else I might want it. Save myself the trouble of cleaning it and finding it again later. Clearly that those covers need some texture. Cloth is very hard to do, so I'm just giving this kind of a suggestion of texture here. Again, travel sketch from the comfort of my study. I would rather have the discomfort of traveling than the comfort of my study. But I'm grateful for the existence of photography and the many generous photographers that put their photos online. I don't know if you're familiar with the site called Pixabay. It's an amazing resource. You can use any of their pictures for any purpose for free. And I do. And there are other sites where the photos might be more artistic, but frankly, I'm not necessarily inspired by photos that are too artistic, because it seems like you would copy somebody else's art. I'd rather have a simple reference photo, which then allows me to express myself. So I'm gonna do a little bit of this, just some extra color. I'm using the Solferino. Some of that made up Naples yellow. And I guess I'm missing some windows, as well as perhaps some kind of a shore. I remember the fun, last time I visited Venice, it was in 2003 with my family. The kids were young. We took the boat a lot to go from place to place. And I found it just so charming that I think it was this church, I'm not positive, but we went up to it, and the steps to the church, which in Italy normally face the piazza, in Venice go straight to the water. It's just so funny. You could, because I guess boats would go up and, pick you up. Somebody needs to pick you up at church or bring you to church. they can just go by boat right up to the church. I want to have a little bit of reflection here, so I'm putting some of the colors it looks kind of messy now, but I think it's better to have it than not to have it. So, I think I'm going to stop here. This is my pretend travel sketch in Venice. I wasn't sketching when I last went to Venice, so I haven't had that pleasure, and I hope to soon. Thank you for watching.